It's not uncommon for people struggling with opioid addiction to end up in prison, and when they get out, to go back to using drugs. But a new approach in Rhode Island may be breaking that cycle. Stephanie Leydon reports.
Here at Rhode Island's Department of Corrections, Ramon Barrera's something of a regular, convicted more times than he can count.
It's depressing sometimes to look back on it, you know.
It's always drugs, buying, selling, using that land him back here. The pull of addiction, he says, is hard to resist, even when facing reality.
My friend OD'd last week.
People just out of prison are at an especially high risk of overdosing.
They might take the same amount they did before, and they were fine with it before they came in, but because their tolerance has gone down, that same dose will actually kill them.
Jennifer Clark, the prison's top doctor, says Rhode Island has found a way to reduce those deaths.
Let me have your ID. Sure.
Offer inmates medication to help control their addiction. In less than 2 years, the number of newly released inmates dying of overdose deaths dropped dramatically.
That is something that we don't see in medicine very often, a 60% reduction in mortality.
Rhode Island's approach to inmate addiction is a radical departure from the norm. Most prisoners, including in Massachusetts, are either weaned from addiction medication or left to detox on their own. And while that may sound like a solution, get clean while you're in prison, Clark says addiction doesn't just go away.
Forced abstinence is not recovery. People are still addicted. They are still craving the drugs.
Rhode Island is the first prison system in the country to offer inmates all 3 FDA-approved medications for treating opioid addiction. Clark says that choice is important because, as with other conditions, no single medication works for everyone. But 2 of them, methadone, dispensed as a liquid, and Suboxone, a strip that melts under the tongue, are opioids. And in prison, that raises a red flag.
The concern was that it would be shared, that it would be diverted.
Among the prisoners.
Among the prisoners.
That people would get hold of these drugs that are meant to treat addiction and instead trade them, sell them.
Yes.
It's a risk the prison works hard to control and one they're willing to take if it saves lives, and perhaps, as Ramon Barrera hopes, keeps people from coming back.
Been here too many times, too much pain, and can't go back to that.
Stephanie Leydon joins me now. Hey there, Stephanie.
Hi, Jim.
What's the evidence that offering this kind of treatment in prison actually does? I know it's well-intended, does keep people from coming back.
Well, they've got evidence that saves lives. They are now looking into recidivism, trying to figure out if it's keeping people out. They do know that people are staying on their medications once they leave prison, and that's probably in part because they are directly connected to a program for addiction services.
How do they address the issue you raised at the end here, was raised at the end about the sharing of opioids within a prison facility?
The contraband.
What do they do? Exactly. What do they do about that?
They take a lot of precautions. I mean, that they're highly secure. They distribute them 1 prisoner at a time. They do mouth checks. Anecdotally, the medical director says she's seen evidence that the contraband in prison has been reduced since they've offered these medications.
I'm guessing Rhode Island sees this as a model for other places. Is Massachusetts a place that sees this as a model too, or no?
Interestingly, Massachusetts has proposed its own legislation that is now in committee.
Part of the criminal justice reform
Part of the criminal justice reform bill in committee, and it would mandate that all county prisons, county jails, and the state prisons offer these kinds of medications. It's being met with some skepticism, though, at this
For these
point.
same reasons about the sharing?
The sharing is the big deal. I mean, folks feel like, yes, we should be able to provide that. The concept of it is great, but the reality is that even when you're careful, prisoners tend to find ways to game the system.
Stephanie, thanks so much.
You're
Stephanie
welcome.
Leydon, appreciate it.